China may have played a role in Canada's recent election, and that's not even the worst of it. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Just a quick reminder, I love reading your comments, so be sure to leave me one, especially one with the honeypot emoji. So Canada has a Chinese influence problem. A lot of it has to do with drugs.
Well, the largest fentanyl lab in the world, it was not in China. It was not in Mexico. It was in Vancouver. Now, fortunately, it was closed down last November, but that shows you the Chinese influence in that city.
Beijing is also heavily involved with human trafficking and crime syndicates in Canada, much of which somehow ends up connected to fentanyl, because everything is 5 degrees from fentanyl. It's like the Kevin Bacon of illicit narcotics. Here's what Canadian investigative journalist Sam Cooper told us on our China Unscripted podcast.
Without any modesty, I've sort of led the world in understanding among journalists that Chinese organized crime, according to the Americans, is running Western Hemisphere money laundering from Vancouver and Toronto. And this is the very complex underground banking system that literally underwrites the Mexican cartels that are running the fentanyl into American cities.
Not only is that nefarious for being a criminal drug operation, but it's nefarious for taking criminal drug operation jobs away from Canadians. Stop trying to destroy everyone's manufacturing base, China. If you want to check out more of that podcast with Sam Cooper, I'll add the link below. But Canada has other reasons to worry about the Chinese Communist Party, including election interference at both the national and local level. I wouldn't even be surprised if they attempted to sway the votes on Canada's Got Talent. Right before Canadians went to the polls, resulting in Liberal Prime Minister Mark Carney achieving a somewhat surprising victory, Canada's spy service, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, or CSIS, warned of election threats from China, Russia, India, and Pakistan. And now that the election is over, Canadian security officials say they have in fact uncovered Chinese election interference in this last election. Because Chinese election interference at this point is more prevalent than microplastics. On April 25th, the Globe and Mail newspaper reported that security agencies in the country uncovered 2 campaigns on social media that apparently were guided by the CCP. The newspaper wrote that the first federal election campaign to take place in the artificial intelligence age has featured fake images of party leaders masquerading as news stories, Chinese efforts to shape views about 2 politicians, and online misinformation about voting. Chinese AI has its fingers in everything. All 12 of them. In particular, the Security and Intelligence Threats to Elections Task Force identified Chinese election interference targeting Liberal leader Mark Carney and Conservative candidate Joe Tai, who coincidentally has criticized the CCP's crackdown on Hong Kong and its policies more generally. The CCP's first operation used both WeChat and news account Youli Yomian to spread both positive and negative narratives about Carney. Yes, both positive and negative stories. Because China doesn't seem to care if they cancel each other out. They're into election interference for the love of the game. In the case of Tai, he was targeted with disparaging content such as mock wanted posters backed up by an actual bounty on his head, with $130,000 for information leading to his arrest and reportedly $1 million for his actual arrest. In an extra disturbing turn of events, Paul Chiang, a Liberal Party candidate in the elections, even made a disturbing remark in January about the Joe Tai situation. At a Chinese language media news conference, he said, "To everyone here, you can claim the $1 million bounty if you bring him to Toronto's Chinese consulate." Which, even if it was a joke, hey, let's kidnap this political candidate who's been critical of China, as a punchline, could use some workshopping. Chiang faced a lot of backlash, including a police probe into his comments, and he ultimately resigned over them. He also publicly apologized and admitted his comments were wrong, although Joe Tai didn't accept his apology. But even more disturbingly, before Chiang's withdrawal from the race, Prime Minister Carney resisted pressure to oust him. While he called the comments deeply offensive, he also said the party wouldn't expel Chiang, and I view this as a teachable moment. Yeah, that teachable moment should have been, there are consequences for your actions. This would be like seeing everything Harvey Weinstein did and saying, Why would we punish him when he helped us learn so much? Tay ultimately did not win in his district, which has a large population from China. One analyst with the Media Ecosystem Observatory said it could have been much worse. And so far, experts are saying that the election's integrity appears to be intact. Of course, since the election wasn't that long ago, more research might disprove that. The thing is, this isn't the first time that China has tried to meddle in Canada's elections. For example, in the 2019 federal elections, the CCP provided secret funding through its Toronto consulate to 11 candidates. That same year, CSIS warned the Liberal Party that one of its candidates might have been compromised by China, but they ignored it. But hey, I'm sure it's no big deal. I mean, what are the odds someone might talk about kidnapping a candidate critical of the CCP? That never happened. But just 2 years later, in 2021, Beijing and its proxies made undeclared cash donations to political campaigns, hired international Chinese students to volunteer for certain candidates full-time, and also threatened a conservative member of parliament named Michael Chong, as well as his family, which I'm sure has nothing to do with Chong sponsoring a parliamentary motion accusing China of human rights abuses. It was just another silly joke. They just really need to work on their punchlines. Then, on June 3rd of last year, the country's National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians released a heavily redacted report outlining even more troubling information. One of the worst instances referenced is a redacted case study in which an unnamed MP is said to have maintained a relationship with a foreign intelligence officer and to have proactively provided the intelligence officer with information provided in confidence. Some Canadians are outraged and are calling for these unnamed officials to be revealed and investigated. But the government refused to release any more information due to national security concerns and the desire not to undermine the due process of any ongoing criminal investigations. I'm sure that won't erode trust in the government. Oh, I'm not being sarcastic. They don't have any trust left to erode, so technically I'm correct because you can't subtract from nothing. The report also said that such illegal cooperation between MPs and CCP operatives are unlikely to result in criminal charges. So did any of this affect the outcomes of the 2019 or 2021 elections in Canada? Well, conservative politicians said the interference had cost them up to 9 seats in 2021. But the Liberal Canadian government panel investigated itself and said that attempted interference did not compromise the results. But as we've seen in other episodes, local election interference is where the CCP makes the most progress, which means China isn't just trying to influence Canada, it already has influence in the country. Which makes you wonder if Trump's 51st state idea has to do with this. Because whenever you're confused about why Trump is doing something, 9 times out of 10 the answer is China. And the answer for the 10th time is trolls for the lulz. So Canada has a big problem, big enough for the BBC to ask in January of 2024, why is Canada so vulnerable to foreign meddling? Which pretty much makes my point. China doesn't need to invade Canada. The CCP has basically gotten all at once without needing to fire a single shot. Influence in elections, criminal syndicates, money laundering, all right across a very undefended border with the United States. So instead of worrying about Trump and elbows up, Canada should be more concerned about bending the knee to China. If you want to know more about China's deep influence in Canada, I really recommend you watch this hour-long podcast we did with Sam Cooper. Just click here. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.